December 24th. Blackwood, Maine. The cold in Blackwood doesn't just sit on your skin. It hunts you. It bypasses the layers of wool and flannel, seeping through the cracks of this rotting farmhouse, seeking out the marrow of my bones. I sat in the cracked leather armchair, staring into the fireplace that had gone cold 3 hours ago. The ash lay gray and heavy over the unburnt logs, looking like the calcified remains of some small, unfortunate creature. The grandfather clock on the wall measured out the silence. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each swing of the pendulum sounded like a hammer driving a nail into a coffin lid. In the absolute stillness of the blizzard outside, the sound was offensively loud. I could hear the wind wheezing through the north-facing window, the wood contracting in the freeze, and the sluggish pump of blood trying to navigate my hardened arteries. Or maybe that was just the sound of the tumor in my gut shifting its weight. The doctors called it stage 4 carcinoma. I called it the squatter. It was eating me from the inside out, gluttonous and rent-free. On the dusty oak table in front of me lay 2 objects, 2 diverging paths. To the left, a cream-colored envelope with the embossed blue logo of First National Bank. Notice of foreclosure. They gave me 7 days to vacate. 7 days. God supposedly built the world in 7 days, and the bank intended to dismantle mine in the same time frame. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used to be Arthur Penhaligon, the structural engineer who signed off on skyscrapers in Boston. I calculated load-bearing limits for megastructures, ensuring they could withstand hurricanes. Yet here I was, unable to support the weight of my own pathetic existence. To the right, a Smith & Wesson, 38 snub nose, cold steel, heavy. It smelled faintly of gun oil, a sharp, industrial scent that offered a strange kind of comfort. It was the only thing in this room that promised a clean solution. No interest rates, no maturity dates, just one loud bang, and then eternal silence. I picked up my pen, my hand trembling not from the cold, but from the exhaustion of a fried nervous system. I wrote in the leather-bound journal, not because I expected anyone to read it, but out of habit. Every failed project requires an incident report. My life was a failed project. Sarah, Lily, I'm sorry. I tried to hold on to the house. I tried to keep the memories alive. But the monster in my stomach and the vultures at the bank won. I won't die in a hospital, hooked up to plastic tubes, pitied by strangers. I'm checking out on my own terms. I stopped writing. A spasm of pain shot up from my lower abdomen, sharp as a razor blade, forcing me to double over. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead despite the sub-zero draft. I exhaled, my breath forming a thin ghost of white mist that vanished instantly. I picked up the revolver. The cylinder spun with a satisfying, well-oiled click. 6 rounds. I only needed 1, but I couldn't do it here. I looked around the living room. These oak floorboards. I laid them myself in the summer of '98, back when Sarah was pregnant with Lily. I could still remember the smell of the varnish, the sound of Sarah laughing as she brought me a glass of iced lemonade. If I blew my brains out here, the blood and gray matter would stain the wood. Someone would have to clean it up. Some poor real estate agent or a trauma cleanup crew. I didn't want to leave a mess. That was the last shred of my engineer's pride. Keep the job site clean. The basement. Right. The basement was perfect. Dirt floor, damp, dark. The fluids would soak into the earth, returning to dust. No scrubbing required. I shoved the gun into the pocket of my heavy wool coat and grabbed the rusty flashlight. I stood up, my knees popping in protest. The house seemed to groan in unison with me. Outside, the wind slammed against the siding, demanding entry to witness the final act. I shuffled down the dark hallway. The shadows here felt thick, almost heavy, pressing down on my shoulders. The smell of mildew grew stronger as I approached the cellar door. The pine wood was warped, the white paint peeling away to reveal the gray, dead grain beneath. I opened the door. Scree-eye. The rusted hinges shrieked like a trapped soul. A draft of stale air rushed up from the dark, carrying the scent of wet earth, fungus, and decay. I clicked the flashlight on. The beam was weak and yellow, cutting a thin slice through the blackness. illuminating the wooden steps that led down into the abyss. I took the first step. Solid. The second step. The wood gave a little. The third step. I paused. A thought flickered in my mind. Is there a hell? Or just nothingness? Are Sarah and Lily there? Or did they just disperse into the universe as senseless atoms? My cynicism outweighed my fear. I had spent a lifetime believing in physics, in concrete and rebar, in things that could be measured. But now, with death staring me in the face, the equations felt useless. I was just a malfunctioning biological machine, about to pull its own plug. I took the fourth step. Crack. The sound was dry, loud, and violent. It wasn't the step that broke. It was the entire wooden landing beneath me. The rot had finally won. The structural integrity of the old house surrendered to the weight of my despair. I didn't even have time to scream. The world beneath my feet simply vanished. Gravity grabbed me by the collar and yanked me down. I fell. I crashed through splintering beams and jagged rocks. The flashlight flew from my hand, spinning and creating wild, chaotic strobes of light before smashing against a wall and dying out. The final impact wasn't the dirt floor of the basement as I had calculated. It was deeper, much deeper. I heard a sickening snap echo up from my right leg, the wet, crunching sound of bone shattering. Then, silence. The darkness swallowed me whole. No wind, no ticking clock, just the sound of my own ragged, wheezing breath and the explosion of pain radiating from my leg, flooding my brain like molten lava. I lay there, twisted in the debris. The smell of damp earth was there, but underneath it was something else. Something wrong. The smell of ozone. Heated metal. It was a sterile scent that didn't belong in nature. I reached out blindly into the dark, trying to orient myself. My hand brushed against the surface I was lying on. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't rock. It was smooth, perfectly flat, and unnaturally cold. Where the hell was I? This wasn't my basement. My basement wasn't this deep, and it certainly wasn't paved with this strange, frictionless metal. I tried to reach for the gun in my pocket, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. The pain from my leg and the cancer in my gut merged into a single, white-hot frequency, dragging me into shock. My consciousness began to fray at the edges. Perfect, I thought, the bitterness coating my tongue like ash. I can't even kill myself, right? Arthur Penhaligon, the great failure. Absolute blackness closed in. But in that final microsecond before my eyes shut, I swore I saw something. A faint, rhythmic pulse of blue light, deep in the cavern, blinking like a waking eye staring straight at me. Pain has a taste. I didn't know that until now. It tastes like copper pennies and bile. It coated the back of my throat, thick and metallic, waking me up before my eyes even opened. I wasn't dead. That was the first disappointment. I tried to inhale, but my chest hitching caused a chain reaction of agony that started in my right tibia and exploded behind my eyes like a flashbang grenade. I let out a sound, a low, wet gurgle that didn't sound human. It sounded like an animal caught in a trap, waiting for the hunter's boot. I forced my eyes open. I expected the pitch-black void of the grave, or perhaps the flickering flames of hell if the Sunday school teachers were right. Instead, I was staring into a twilight gloom, bathed in a soft, rhythmic blue luminescence. I blinked, trying to clear the grit and tears from my vision. I was lying on my back. My body felt heavy, anchored by a gravity that seemed stronger down here. I tried to shift my weight, and the scream caught in my throat. I looked down at my right leg. It was twisted at an angle that defied anatomy. The denim of my jeans was soaked dark, ripped open where the jagged white of the bone had punched through the skin. A compound fracture. Tib-fib break. I categorized it automatically, my engineer's brain trying to impose order on chaos. Structural failure of the support column. But it wasn't the leg that made my breath stop. It was what lay beneath me. I wasn't on dirt. I wasn't on the jagged rocks of a sinkhole. I was lying on a floor made of a material I couldn't name. It was black, not just dark, but an abyssal black that seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. It felt smooth under my fingertips, colder than ice, yet it didn't have the condensation or bite of frozen metal. It felt dormant. Where? I wheezed, my voice cracking. I rolled my head to the side, fighting the nausea. The space was vast. The blue light wasn't coming from a lamp. It was emanating from the walls themselves, high, vaulted walls that curved upward into a dome hidden in shadows. Geometric patterns, faint interlacing hexagons, pulsed slowly under the surface of the walls, like veins carrying bioluminescent blood. And there, in the center of the chamber, floating about 4 feet off the ground, was the source. It was a sphere. It was about the size of a basketball, but its surface was a shifting, liquid mirror. It didn't look solid. It looked like a drop of mercury suspended in zero-G, constantly rippling, yet holding a perfect spherical shape. I squeezed my eyes shut. Hallucination. It had to be. This was the end stage. The shock from the fall. The blood loss. The toxins from the cancer flooding my liver. My brain was firing its last neurons, dumping DMT into my system to ease the transition into death. I had read about this. Near-death experiences. Aliens. Angels. Tunnels of light. It was just chemistry. Just the synapses misfiring before the shutdown. It's not real. Arthur, I whispered to the cold air. Just close your eyes and let go. But the smell was too distinct. That scent of ozone like the air after a lightning strike, mixed with something sterile and ancient. Hallucinations don't smell this specific. I coughed, a violent spasm that racked my ribs. I turned my head and retched. Nothing came up but a mouthful of dark, clotted blood from the internal bleeding or the biting of my tongue. I couldn't tell. The blood splattered onto the pristine black floor. Drip, drip. The sound echoed in the silence. And then, the room changed. The moment my blood touched that black surface, a ripple shot through the floor. It was instantaneous, like a high-voltage current finding a ground. The faint blue veins in the walls flared bright white, blindingly intense, before settling into a steady, clinical cyan. A low hum began to vibrate through the floor, resonating in my teeth. It was a sound on the very edge of hearing, a sub-bass frequency that I felt in my chest cavity more than my ears. The sphere in the center of the room stopped its lazy rippling. It solidified. It turned from liquid silver to a matte, light-absorbing gray. Then, it moved. It didn't fly. It simply was at point A, and then it was at point B. It closed the 20-foot distance between us in a blink, hovering directly over my chest. I panicked. The primal, lizard brain fear overrode the pain. I scrambled backward, crab walking on my elbows, dragging my shattered leg. I screamed as the bone ground together, but terror was a powerful anesthetic. "Get back," I yelled, fumbling for the pocket of my coat. The gun, the Smith & Wesson, my fingers, numb and clumsy, found the cold steel grip. I yanked it out, the front sight snagging on the wool lining for a terrifying second before breaking free. I pointed the muzzle at the floating object, my hand shaking so hard the gun was a blur. "Stay back." The sphere hovered there, motionless. It didn't have eyes, but I felt watched. I felt scanned. A thin sheet of light, flat and green, fanned out from the equator of the sphere. It swept over me, starting from my boots and moving up toward my head. It passed through the gun, through my chest, through my skull. It didn't burn, but it felt invasive, a cold tingle, like someone walking over my grave. The green light snapped off. The sphere remained silent. "What are you?" I gasped, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving me trembling and cold. "What is this place?" For a long moment, there was only the hum of the machine. I lowered the gun slightly, the weight of it becoming too much for my weak wrist. Then, a voice filled the room. It didn't come from the sphere. It came from everywhere at once, vibrating the air molecules directly around my ears. It wasn't a human voice. It had no gender, no inflection, no breath. It was the sound of pure data being converted into audio waves. Biological unit identified, the voice said. It was calm, detached, and terrifyingly loud. Carbon-based, bipedal, designation, Homo sapiens. Late-stage degradation detected. I stared at the sphere, my mouth hanging open. Degradation. Scan complete. The voice continued. ignoring my confusion. Subject is operating at 12% capacity. Critical structural failure in lower locomotion limb. Multiple organ systems approaching terminal shutdown. Cellular apoptosis rate accelerated. It was talking about my cancer. It was reading my death warrant like a grocery list. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, gripping the gun tighter. "Are you military? Is this a government bunker?" The sphere rotated slightly. Query irrelevant. The immediate anomaly is the contamination of the interface. A small, focused beam of red light shot from the sphere, pointing directly at the puddle of my blood on the floor. Foreign biological fluid detected. Hazard. Cleanup required. Cleanup. I choked out a laugh. A hysterical, bubbling laugh. "I'm dying here, and you're worried about the floor." The sphere drifted closer, descending until it was inches from my face. I could see my own reflection in its matte surface, a pale, terrified old man with blood on his chin, holding a gun that looked like a toy against this technology. "You are the source of the leak," the voice stated. "Logic dictates the source must be repaired to preserve the integrity of the facility. However, the unit appears to be obsolete. Resizing resource allocation." It paused. The hum deepened. Subject displays high levels of cortisol and adrenaline. Internal dialogue suggests a desire for termination. Yet, survival protocols are active. Contradiction detected. It knew. It knew I wanted to die. And it knew I was fighting to live. It was analyzing my soul with algorithms. "Let me die," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. I let the gun clatter to the black floor. "Just let me die." The sphere pulsed once, a slow, white heartbeat. "Request denied." It said, "A unique error code has been identified in your neural network. An anomaly in your programming that warrants study. You are broken. Biological unit. But you are broken in a way that is statistically improbable." The sphere began to glow with a warming amber light. "Initiating emergency stasis protocol. Do not resist. Pain is merely a signal. We will mute the signal." Before I could ask what that meant, a beam of light hit my forehead. It wasn't a laser. It was heavier. It felt like a warm blanket being thrown over my brain. The agony in my leg vanished instantly, not because the leg was healed, but because my mind had been disconnected from it. My vision tunneled. The last thing I heard was that cold, logical voice echoing in the fading consciousness. "Welcome to the debugging chamber, Arthur. Prepare for reformatting." I woke up expecting the fire of hell or the silence of the grave. I got neither. I got the hum. That low-frequency vibration was back, rattling the fillings in my teeth. I gasped, sitting up violently, my hands scrabbling against the slick black floor. The movement was a reflex, a panic response, and I braced myself for the scream of agony from my shattered leg. It didn't come. I stared down. My jeans were still torn, stiff with dried blood that looked like black tar in the blue light. The bone, the jagged white spear that had been protruding through my shin, was gone. The skin was unbroken. There was a scar, faint and pink, looking like it was 10 years old, not 10 hours. I touched it. It was numb, dead to the sensation, as if the nerves had been cauterized or simply switched off. "What did you do to me?" My voice was a croak, echoing too loudly in the vaulted chamber. The sphere entity 7, though I didn't know its name yet, was exactly where it had been before, hovering, watching. The liquid metal surface rippled, forming spikes and valleys before smoothing out again. "Repairs are provisional," the voice boomed. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. "Structural integrity of the locomotion limb has been restored using carbon nanotube weaving at the cellular level. However, the host system remains critically unstable." I scrambled backward, pushing myself up until my back hit the cold, curved wall. "Stay away from me. Are you a demon? Is this hell?" The sphere drifted closer. It didn't care about my fear. It moved with the indifference of a microscope slide adjusting over a bacteria sample. The concept of hell is a primitive theological construct used by level 1 civilizations to enforce behavioral compliance. It stated flatly, "You are in a substratum data recovery node. And you Arthur Penhaligon. Are a corrupt file. I'm a human being. I shouted, the anger rising to cover the terror. I'm a man. I want out. Where is the exit? Let me go. Exit denied. The sphere replied. Quarantine protocols are in effect. Your operating system is infected with a recursive loop algorithm that consumes 85% of your processing power. To release you now would be a waste of biological resources. You would simply self-terminate within 48 hours. Recursive loop? What are you talking about? I stood up, testing the leg. It held. It felt like walking on a wooden peg, but it held. I'm grieving. I lost my family. That's not a virus. You metallic bastard. That's love. The sphere pulsed a sharp, warning red. Incorrect. It countered. Let us examine the code. Suddenly, the air between us shimmered. A holographic projection exploded into existence. It wasn't a picture. It was a stream of data complex waveforms, spiking graphs, and flowing geometry that looked like a visual representation of a nervous system. This is you, the entity explained. Or rather, this is the energetic signature of your consciousness. It zoomed in on a chaotic, dark knot of energy in the center of the graph. It looked like a black hole, sucking in all the light around it. You call this grief. In the physics of consciousness, this is known as a high-entropy feedback loop. Allow me to explain the mechanics of your suffering, so you may understand the inefficiency. I wanted to cover my ears, but I couldn't move. The air pressure seemed to pin me against the wall. The human brain is a bioelectric transmitter and receiver. The entity began, its voice shifting into a lecture mode that felt chillingly academic. Every thought you produce generates a specific electrical charge, a command code. Every emotion you feel is the magnetic charge, the energy that broadcasts that code into the quantum field. When you recall the termination of your offspring and mate, you are not merely remembering, you are actively reconstructing the neural architecture of that trauma in the present moment. I felt the blood drain from my face. Stop it. Observe the mechanism. It continued, ignoring me. When you access the file labeled accident, your hypothalamus secretes a specific cocktail of neuropeptides. These chemicals dock with the receptors of your cells, forcing them to vibrate at a frequency of 15.4 Hz, the frequency of despair. This is a low-energy, high-density state. Your cells become addicted to this chemical rush. You claim you want to be happy, Arthur, but your biology craves the rush of the victim peptide. You are a drug addict, and your drug of choice is your own misery. It's not a drug. I screamed, tears hot and stinging in my eyes. It's my wife. It's my daughter. I killed them. You are engaging the loop again. The sphere noted coldly. Observe the energy loss. On the hologram, the dark knot flared. I saw tendrils of light, my life force being sucked into that vortex and vanishing. This is thermodynamically offensive, the entity said, sounding almost disgusted. You create a thought. It is my fault. This thought triggers a chemical release. The chemical release confirms the feeling of guilt. The feeling of guilt generates more thoughts of, it is my fault, it is a closed circuit, an infinite loop. My knees gave way. I slid down the wall, clutching my chest. I felt like I was being dissected while still awake. Every word it said felt like a scalpel cutting away the romanticism of my tragedy, leaving only cold, hard biology. You're saying, I gasped, air hunger clutching at my throat. You're saying I gave myself cancer, that I'm killing myself because, out of habit. Precisely, the sphere said. The hologram vanished. Sadness is a function. It is designed to process loss and facilitate learning. But you have hacked the function and turned it into a permanent state of being. You have identified with the glitch. You believe. I stared at the floor. The nausea was overwhelming. The sheer weight of what it was suggesting was too heavy to lift. If it was right, if my pain was just chemistry, then my martyrdom was a lie. My suffering wasn't noble. It was just a broken machine spinning its gears. Why? I whispered. Why tell me this? Just kill me. The sphere lowered itself until it was eye level with me. The blue light softened. Because the hardware is still viable, it said, and because the universe does not waste code. You have generated a massive amount of potential energy in that dark knot of yours. If we can reverse the polarity, if we can change the command line from self-destruct to create, that same energy could reshape your reality. But first, you must admit that your grief is nothing more than bad programming. I looked up at the smooth, faceless surface of the machine. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to scream that it didn't understand love or loss. But deep down, in the pit of my rotting stomach, a terrifying thought took root. What if it's right? The room spun. My brain, overloaded by the influx of new data and the rejection of old beliefs, finally pulled the emergency brake. Darkness rushed in from the edges of my vision. Rest now. The voice echoed as I slumped sideways. The unlearning process is invasive. Thirst woke me up before hunger did. It was a dry, scratching sensation in my throat, like I had swallowed a handful of sand. I sat up, groggy and disoriented. The blue light in the chamber hadn't changed, suggesting time here didn't follow the rules of the sun and moon above. It could have been an hour. It could have been a week. Water. I croaked. A small panel in the black wall slid open silently. A metallic cube, floating on a magnetic cushion, drifted toward me. On it sat a simple, transparent container filled with clear liquid. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it and drank greedily. It was tasteless, odorless, but cold and incredibly refreshing. As the liquid hit my stomach, I felt a strange clarity wash over me, a sharpening of the senses that felt almost artificial. Hydration levels restored to optimal. The voice of the entity resonated from the ceiling. Glucose and electrolyte balance adjusted. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. You're keeping me alive like a lab rat. A lab rat serves a purpose, the entity replied. The sphere descended from the shadows of the dome. You have yet to demonstrate utility. I stood up. The stiffness in my joints was gone. Even the gnawing ache of the cancer seemed muted, pushed into the background noise of my body. But my mind was still fighting. I don't want to be useful, I snapped. I told you. I'm done. You showed me your graphs and your chemical equations. Congratulations. You proved I'm a biological mess. Now let me out so I can finish what I started. The sphere pulsed a slow, rhythmic, purple. You cannot finish what you started, it said, because you do not understand how you started it. You believe you are a victim of random chaos. You believe the event, the vehicular collision on Route 9, was an accident. My blood ran cold. I froze. Don't. You believe, the entity continued, its voice raising in intensity, that an intoxicated driver in a Ford pickup truck crossed the center line and struck your sedan. You believe you were helpless. I was helpless. I roared, the rage exploding out of me instantly. I lunged at the sphere, swinging my fist at the metal. It was a futile gesture. The sphere simply drifted back an inch, just out of reach. I was driving. I tried to swerve. There was ice. He was going 80 miles an hour. Those are the Newtonian mechanics of the event. The entity said calm, infuriatingly calm. Action and reaction, mass and velocity. But that is only the surface layer of reality. The interface. Let us look at the code beneath. The air shimmered again. This time, the hologram wasn't a graph. It was a scene. It was the interior of my car. It was hyper-realistic, rendered in ghostly blue light but with terrifying detail. I saw the back of my own head. I saw Sarah in the passenger seat, laughing, pointing at something out the window. I saw Lily in the back, asleep with her headphones on. I stumbled back, my hands covering my mouth. Turn it off. Please. God. Turn it off. Observe the driver, the entity commanded. Observe the frequency of the subject. Arthur Penhaligon. Time index. T-minus 10 minutes to impact. The hologram zoomed in on my face. I looked younger, healthier, but there was something dark in my eyes. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Analysis of internal monologue. The entity narrated. Subject is consumed by anxiety. Subject is running a simulation of financial ruin. Subject is angry at his spouse for spending money on a vacation they cannot afford. Subject is broadcasting a specific signal. I cannot handle this. I want an escape. I want this to stop. I shook my head violently. No. That's... Everyone worries about money. That doesn't mean I wanted them dead. Precision is required. The entity corrected. You did not desire their termination. However, the quantum field does not process English. It processes. The scene shifted. I saw the world outside the car not as trees and road, but as a grid of probability waves. This is the observer effect. The entity lectured. In quantum mechanics, a particle does not exist in a definite state until it is observed. Reality is a soup of infinite possibilities, superpositions. You, the observer, collapse that wave function into a single event based on the frequency of your observation. A red line appeared, connecting my head to the oncoming traffic. For months leading up to this event, you lived in a state of high beta brainwaves, stress, fear, resentment. You were broadcasting a chaotic frequency. You were signaling the field that you were a victim, that the world was hostile, that you were trapped. The hologram showed the other truck, the drunk driver. This individual was also a chaotic node, a match. Your frequency of victimhood sought a corresponding frequency of perpetrator. Quantum entanglement established. You didn't just drive down that road, Arthur. You magnetized that truck. You collapsed the probability wave of safe arrival and selected the probability wave of catastrophe because it matched your internal state of chaos. Liar. I screamed. I grabbed a loose stone from the corner of the room, debris from my fall, and hurled it at the sphere. It bounced off the metal casing with a harmless clink. I loved them. I would have died for them. I fell to my knees, sobbing. The pain was worse than the broken leg. It was the pain of a soul being flayed alive. It was an accident. It was just bad luck. There is no luck. The entity's voice was merciless, stripping away my last defense. There is only input and output. The universe is a mirror, Arthur. It reflects what you are, not what you want. You were fear. You were anger. And the universe gave you a scenario that justified that fear and anger. It paused. The hologram froze on the moment of impact, the headlights blinding, the glass shattering. You feel guilty not because you swerved too late, the entity whispered, the sound vibrating in my very bones. You feel guilty because, on a subconscious level, you know you invited this. You wrote the code, and now you are punishing yourself by rerunning the crash site in your mind every day, ensuring that you never leave it. My vision blurred. The room began to spin violently. The air felt too thin. My chest heaved, gasping for oxygen that wouldn't come. Panic attack. I can't. I clawed at my throat. The system is overloading. The entity noted dryly. The ego is attempting to reject the new data to protect its narrative. This is the extinction burst of your old personality. I tried to stand up, to run, to fight, but my body refused. The darkness crept in from the periphery, cold and absolute. I collapsed forward onto the black floor, my cheek pressed against the cool metal. The last thing I heard before I blacked out was the hum of the machine, indifferent and steady, and the voice saying, "Breakdown complete. Now, we can begin the rebuild." I had been in the hole for 3 days, or at least, that was my estimation based on the cycles of sleep and wakefulness, and the number of nutrient cubes the entity had dispensed. My body felt different. The gnawing hunger of the cancer was still there, a dull background noise, but the crushing fatigue, the spiritual heaviness that made lifting a finger feel like lifting a mountain, had lifted. I sat cross-legged on the black floor. The sphere hovered in front of me, pulsating with a soft, rhythmic amber light. It felt less like an interrogator now and more like a teacher. A cold, unfeeling, terrifyingly strict teacher. Review. The entity commanded. Define the mechanism of manifestation. I took a deep breath. 3 days ago, I would have spat in its face. Now, I answered like a student reciting a catechism. The universe is a holographic projection of consciousness. I said, my voice steady in the quiet chamber. Matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. My thoughts act as the electrical charge, the signal. My emotions act as the magnetic charge, the wave that carries the signal. Together, they form an electromagnetic signature that influences the quantum field. Adequate. The entity droned. But theoretical understanding is useless without execution. Today, we address the source code of your future. The air in the room shifted. The holographic display appeared again. But this time it wasn't showing my past trauma. It showed a complex, flowing stream of binary code 0 seconds and 1 second cascading like a digital waterfall that slowly morphed into physical objects. A house, a car, a healthy human body. Most biological units operate under a fatal misconception. The entity began. You believe you must see it to believe it. This is Newtonian logic. Materialism. It is backward. It rotated the hologram. In the quantum model, you must believe it to see it. You must observe the probability wave before it collapses into matter. But here is where your species fails. You attempt to write new code over a corrupted operating system. You mean trying to think positive while feeling like crap? I said. Crudely put, but accurate. The entity acknowledged. Let us analyze your financial ruin protocol. A graph appeared. It showed 2 lines. One was labeled intent, thought. The other energy, emotion. You stand in front of a mirror and say, I want to be wealthy. I want to save my house. That is the thought. It is a clear signal to the universe. But look at the carrier wave beneath it. The energy line on the graph was jagged, erratic, and dipped deep into the negative spectrum. While you think, I want wealth, your body is vibrating at the frequency of lack. You feel the knot in your stomach. You feel the anxiety of the debt. You are broadcasting the signal. I do not have the universe is literal. Arthur, it does not hear what you... I stared at the graph. It was a picture of my life. Every time I bought a lottery ticket, every time I prayed for a job, I was doing it from a place of desperation. So the universe just confirms my desperation. I murmured, because that's the strongest signal. Correct, the entity said. Code. I need money. Emotion. Fear of poverty. Result. More poverty. The system is working perfectly. You are simply giving it the wrong instructions. So how do I change it? I asked, leaning forward. How do I fake a feeling? How can I feel wealthy when I'm living in a hole and losing my house? The sphere drifted closer. The amber light intensified, warming my face. You do not fake it. You generate it. You are a biochemical reactor, Arthur. You have the ability to create any chemical state you desire, independent of your environment. The hologram changed again. It showed a human brain lighting up in the frontal lobe. This is the prefrontal cortex, the seat of creation. When you truly focus on an outcome, when you visualize it with enough intensity that you lose track of time and space, your brain does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. It begins to fire the same neural circuits as if the event were happening now. The image zoomed into the body. If you can hold that vision and combine it with the elevated emotion of gratitude for the event having already occurred, your body will begin to chemically change. It will upregulate genes for health. It will downregulate genes for disease. You will literally become a different person on a cellular level. Gratitude. I tested the word. It felt foreign. Being thankful for something I don't have yet. Gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. The entity stated, when you receive something, you say thank you. Therefore, being thankful before the event signals to the quantum field that the event has already happened. The field simply aligns reality to match that signal. I sat back, rubbing my temples. It sounded like magic, but it also sounded like engineering. Reverse engineering. Instead of waiting for the outside world to change how I felt inside, I had to change how I felt inside to affect the outside world. And my cancer? I asked quietly. Is that just code too? Your cancer is a feedback loop of stress hormones breaking down your genetic integrity. The entity said cold-heartedly. You have been signaling your body to die for 3 years. It is simply obeying your command. If you want to live, you must signal it to thrive. But you cannot do that as Arthur the victim. You must become Arthur the creator. The sphere retreated slightly. The light dimming. The theory session is concluded. Now, we begin the calibration. You must construct a new future. Not with hope, not with wishing, but with precise, unwavering intent and elevated energy. Close your eyes. The entity commanded. We are going to write a new line of code. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the darkness behind my eyelids didn't feel like a void. It felt like a canvas. Okay, I whispered. I'm ready. Where do we start? We start, the voice echoed in my head, by feeling the gratitude for the life you have not yet lived. Open the door. I stood in the center of the chamber, my legs planted firmly on the black floor. My eyes were fixed on a section of the seamless wall where I imagined an exit should be. The request is invalid, the entity replied. It hovered near the ceiling, a silent observer to my struggle. There is no door to open. There is only the obstacle to be removed. Don't play word games with me, I snapped. I was sweating. My shirt was damp, sticking to my back. You said I create my reality. You said if I align my intent with my energy, the field responds. I am intending to leave. I am visualizing the exit. So why am I still staring at a blank wall? Because you are lying, the entity said. I clenched my fists. I am not lying. I can see it in my head. A staircase. Right there. Wooden steps, leading up to the cellar. You see the image. The entity corrected. But you are broadcasting the frequency of. Then how the hell do I do it? I yelled, my voice cracking. The frustration was physically painful. A tight knot in my chest that mimicked the angina of a heart attack. The beta test. The entity announced. Your objective is simple. Create a way out. Not by finding a hidden switch. Not by digging. But by shifting your state of being until the solution presents itself. I closed my eyes again. I tried to summon the feeling the entity had talked about. Gratitude. Relief. The feeling of cool, fresh air hitting my face. I am out. I am standing on the grass. The snow is crunching under my boots. I tried to force the emotion into my chest. I squeezed my eyes tighter, straining my brain like a muscle. Feel it. Feel the joy. But all I felt was the damp cold of the cave. All I felt was the lingering throb in my healed leg. And beneath it all, the insidious whisper of the cancer, a sharp, biting pain in my stomach that had returned with a vengeance the moment I started to stress. It's not working. I'm just a crazy old man talking to a metal ball in a hole. Virus detected. The entity droned. Doubt is corrupting the signal. Signal integrity dropping to 40%. Shut up. I growled. I focused harder. I am powerful. I am a creator. I opened my eyes, expecting a miracle. The wall was still there. Cold. Black. Impenetrable. A wave of nausea hit me. I staggered, my vision swimming. The pain in my gut flared up, not a dull ache this time, but a jagged, tearing sensation that brought me to my knees. I retched, dry heaving onto the floor. System failure, the entity observed. Subject is reverting to old subroutines. Stress hormones are flooding the bloodstream. Cortisol levels critical. I can't do it. I gasped, clutching my stomach. Tears of pain and humiliation leaked from my eyes. It's all bullshit. You're just a machine. I'm just a dying man. There's no magic. Physics is physics. I rolled onto my side, curling into a fetal position. The despair was heavier than before because now it was coupled with the crushing weight of false hope. I had believed, for a moment, that I could be more, and that belief had just been shattered against the hard rock of reality. You are using Newtonian logic to solve a quantum problem, the entity said, its voice devoid of sympathy. You are trying to force matter to change with your mind. That is not creation. That is tyranny. And matter resists tyranny. Leave me alone, I sobbed. Just let me die here. At least the hole is already dug. The pain was blinding now. It felt like the tumor was expanding, pushing against my spine, eating me alive to punish me for my arrogance. I was sweating profusely, shaking uncontrollably. This was it. The end. The surge of energy from the past few days had just been a rally before the final crash. This is the precipice. Arthur. The voice seemed to come from far away. You have hit the wall of your analytical mind. You cannot think your way out of this. You cannot analyze your way out. You must surrender. I surrender. I whispered into the cold floor. I give up. No. The entity corrected. You are quitting. That is different. Quitting is an act of defeat. Surrender is an act of trust. You must let go of the how. You must let go of the when. You must let go of the need to be saved. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The pain was a white noise that drowned out everything else. I closed my eyes, not to visualize, but to escape. I drifted into the darkness, letting the agony wash over me, no longer fighting it, no longer trying to control it. I was just a speck of dust in the dark. I was nothing, and in that nothingness, for the first time, there was silence. The Arthur who was an engineer, a husband, a failure, he began to dissolve, and in the space he left behind, something else began to stir. The pain didn't stop, but I stopped being the person feeling it. It was a strange sensation, like stepping out of a noisy room and closing a heavy glass door behind you. I could still see the room. I could still register the signals firing from my stomach to my brain, but I wasn't in the room anymore. I was observing it from the hallway. I lay on the cold floor, eyes closed, breath shallow. I wasn't trying to escape the cave anymore. I wasn't trying to heal the cancer. I wasn't trying to please the sphere. I had simply run out of try. Theta state achieved. The entity's voice whispered, softer now, almost blending with my own thoughts. Brainwave frequency, 4 Hz. The door to the subconscious is open. In this darkness, I wasn't Arthur Penhaligon. I wasn't a widower. I wasn't a bankrupt engineer. I was just awareness, a point of consciousness floating in a vast, velvety black void. Surrender. The word floated by. I grabbed it, not with my hands, but with my intent. To surrender didn't mean to lose. It meant to stop fighting the current. It meant realizing that I was part of the river. I began to feel something new. It wasn't the frantic, desperate gratitude I had tried to force earlier. This was quieter. It was the feeling you get when you look at a sleeping child, or a sunset over a frozen lake. It was a deep, resonating hum of appreciation for simply existing. I focused on my body, not the flesh and bone lying on the floor, but the energy that animated it. I visualized the tumor, but instead of seeing a black, ugly lump of death, I saw it as a knot of blocked energy, a cluster of cells that had forgotten their function because I had been screaming confused orders at them for years. I forgive you, I thought, sending the signal to the cancer. I forgive myself for creating you. You can rest now. We can all rest. A warmth began to spread from my solar plexus. It wasn't the heat of inflammation. It was golden, liquid, and soothing. It felt like love, not the romantic kind, but the unconditional, architectural love of the universe for its creations. Coherence detected. The entity murmured. Heart and brain synchronization. 100%. The signal is clear. I didn't think about a staircase. I didn't think about the door. I just stayed in that feeling of golden wholeness. I felt wealthy, not because I had money, but because I had life. I felt healthy, not because the pain was gone, but because I was more than my body. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity. It might have been 10 minutes. It might have been 10 hours. Then, a sound pulled me back. Kerchunk. A heavy, mechanical sound of stone grinding against stone. I opened my eyes. The blue light of the chamber seemed brighter, cleaner. The crushing pain in my stomach was gone, not suppressed. Gone. It felt as if someone had reached inside and untied a tight knot. I sat up. I felt light, incredibly light. I looked at the wall I had been staring at earlier. It hadn't disappeared, but a section of the black, seamless metal had slid back, revealing raw, jagged rock behind it. And in that rock, carved by something ancient, was a narrow, spiraling tunnel leading up. I stood up. My legs felt strong. I walked over to the opening. It wasn't a staircase I had made with magic. It was a ventilation shaft that had been there for thousands of years, hidden behind a camouflage panel. I looked back at the sphere. It was always there. I whispered. The potential was always there. The entity corrected. But your perception filters were set to no exit. You could not see the solution because your brain was not wired to recognize it. You changed the frequency, and the camouflage dropped. I ran my hand over the rough stone of the tunnel. It was real. Cold, gritty, and real. I didn't create the tunnel, I said, turning back to the machine. I just tuned into the version of reality where I found it. You shifted timelines, the entity said. You moved from the timeline of the victim, who dies in the dark, to the timeline of the initiate, who finds the path. The tunnel exists in one, the wall exists in the other. You chose the channel. I laughed, a genuine, bubbling laugh that sounded strange in my own ears. It was the laugh of someone who realizes the cosmic joke. I looked down at my hands. They looked the same, but they felt different. They felt like tools of a master builder, not the shaking hands of a desperate man. And the cancer? I asked, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. The scan shows a 60% reduction in tumor mass density in the last 4 hours. The entity reported casually, as if discussing the weather. The biological unit is flooded with dopamine, oxytocin, and regenerative enzymes. You have initiated a spontaneous remission event. Keep running this program, and the hardware will fully repair itself within 30 solar cycles. I nodded. It made perfect sense. It was just code. I walked toward the tunnel. The air coming from it smelled of snow and pine needles. The smell of the surface. The smell of life. I stopped at the threshold and looked back at the floating silver ball. Thank you, I said. Gratitude received. The entity replied. Now go. The simulation requires a new player. I stepped into the tunnel. I began to climb. I wasn't climbing out of a hole. I was climbing out of my old self. The climb was brutal, but I didn't feel the burn in my muscles as pain. I felt it as proof of life. When I finally pushed aside the rotted floorboards and pulled myself up into the ruins of my living room, the sun was shining. It wasn't the weak, gray light of a Maine winter. It was blindingly brilliant, reflecting off the pristine white snow that had blown in through the broken windows. I stood up. My clothes were tattered, covered in ancient dust and dried blood. I smelled like a tomb. But as I looked around the wrecked house, the shattered furniture, the water stains on the ceiling, the empty whiskey bottles, I didn't feel the familiar crushing weight of despair. I saw them as artifacts, relics of a man who no longer existed. 1 week later, the sheriff's cruiser crunched up the gravel driveway, followed by a sleek black sedan. I watched them from the porch. I was holding a mug of coffee, real coffee, not the cheap instant stuff I used to ration. Sheriff Miller stepped out, adjusting his belt. He looked uncomfortable. Behind him, a man in a tailored wool coat emerged from the sedan. Mr. Henderson from First National Bank. The executioner. Arthur. Miller called out, squinting at me. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. We haven't seen you in town for a week. Folks were worried. I've been busy. Jim, I said. My voice was calm, resonant. It didn't have that tremor of anxiety anymore. Henderson marched up the steps, clutching a clipboard. He avoided eye contact, focusing on the foreclosure notice stapled to my door. Mr. Penhaligon, I'm afraid time is up. We have a court order. You need to vacate the premises immediately so the locksmith can. He stopped. He finally looked at me. I wasn't the shaking, alcoholic wreck he had met last month. I was shaved. I was standing straight, my shoulders back. But it was more than that. It was the energy. I looked at him not with fear, but with a strange, detached amusement. I was projecting the frequency of authority. I wasn't asking for mercy. I was broadcasting the signal that I was the one in control. Mr. Henderson, I said, cutting him off gently. I believe there's been a shift in the portfolio. Henderson blinked, confused by my tone. I break. Excuse me. The house, I said, gesturing to the rotting structure around us. It's a teardown. We both know that. The bank doesn't want this liability. You'll spend more on demolition and hazardous material cleanup than the land is worth. It was true, but the old Arthur would never have said it. The old Arthur would have begged. That's not, Henderson stammered, his aggression faltering against my wall of calm. I have a proposal, I continued. I am restructuring my assets. I will have the arrears paid in full within 30 days, plus 6 months in advance. In exchange, You will freeze the foreclosure process immediately." Henderson laughed. A nervous, incredulous sound. 30 days. "Arthur, with all due respect, you're unemployed. You have no credit. This is over." I didn't flinch. I held the vision. The check is in the mail. The money is already mine. I felt the gratitude of the transaction being completed. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. Subject: Consulting Inquiry. The Zenith Project. I tapped the screen. It was from Skidmore and Owings, one of the largest architectural firms in Boston. "Dear Mr. Penhaligon, we recently came across your old designs for the organic tension structural system. We are facing a critical load-bearing issue on our new seaport tower, and your theoretical work seems to be the only solution. We would like to retain you as a senior consultant. Attached is a preliminary retainer contract." I scrolled down to the figure. It was enough to pay off the mortgage twice over. I smiled. Not a surprised smile, but a knowing one. Of course, the universe was just delivering the mail. I turned the phone screen toward Henderson. As I was saying, my assets are restructuring. I can sign a promissory note right now against this contract. Henderson stared at the phone, then at me. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then sighed, deflating. The energy in the room had shifted. He couldn't fight it because I wasn't fighting him. I had simply moved to a reality where he agreed with me. I'll need to call corporate," he mumbled, stepping back. "But if this is legit, we might be able to work something out." Later that afternoon, I went to the clinic in Bangor. Dr. Evans sat behind his desk, holding up my new MRI scans. He kept flipping them over, adjusting his glasses, looking for a mistake. "I don't understand," he muttered for the third time. "The machine must be calibrated wrong." "What is it, Doc?" I asked, sitting comfortably on the exam table. "The mass in your stomach," he said, pointing to the ghostly gray image. "It's calcified. It's shrinking. It looks like it's encapsulating itself. The active cancer cells are dormant." "Arthur, did you go to Mexico? Did you take some experimental drug?" "No drugs," I said. "Just a system reboot." He looked at me like I was crazy, but he couldn't argue with the pictures. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen a stage 4 regression like this. It's a miracle." "No," I corrected him softly. "It's mechanics." I walked out of the hospital into the crisp winter air. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs without pain. I drove back to the farmhouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple and gold. I parked the car and walked to the edge of the property, looking out over the frozen woods. I thought about Sarah and Lily. The grief was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer a black hole sucking me in. It was a scar, a mark of history, proof that I had loved and lost. It was a memory, stored data, but it was no longer the active program running my life. I looked down at the ground, imagining the deep cave beneath my feet. The entity was down there, silent, waiting. I wasn't going to tell anyone about the cave. They wouldn't understand. They would call it God, or aliens, or madness. They would try to worship it or destroy it. But I knew what it really was. It was a mirror. And for the first time in my life, I liked what I saw in the reflection. I turned back to the house. It was rotting and old, yes, but as I looked at it now, I didn't see ruin. I saw potential. I saw the renovation. I saw the future I was about to build, brick by brick, thought by thought. I was the architect again. I went back down one last time, not to beg, not to hide, but to say goodbye. The tunnel I had discovered or manifested was now a familiar path. I descended the spiral stairs with the ease of a man walking into his own study. The air grew colder as I went deeper, but the cold didn't bite anymore. It felt crisp, like the air inside a cathedral. When I stepped into the black chamber, the blue light was dimmer than before. The hum, that constant sub-bass vibration that had shaken my bones for days, was now a faint, fading whisper. The sphere entity 7 hung in the center of the room, but it looked heavy. The liquid metal surface was no longer rippling with infinite possibility. It was still, matte, like a machine powering down. "I'm here," I said. My voice echoed, strong and clear. "Cycle complete." The voice responded. It sounded tired. If a machine could be tired. Or maybe spent was the better word. Biological unit Arthur Penhaligon. Structural integrity, 98%. Neural pathway reconfiguration, successful. Reality distortion field, active. I got the contract. I told it, smiling. "And the doctor says the tumor is shrinking. You saved my life." The sphere pulsed once, a weak flicker of amber light. "Correction," it said. "I merely provided the diagnostic tools." I walked closer, reaching out a hand toward the smooth, black metal. I hesitated, then touched it. It was no longer freezing. It was warm, humming with the last dregs of energy. "What happens to you now?" I asked. "Do you go back? To wherever you came from?" "I do not go back," the entity replied. "I am not an external agent. I never was." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're alien technology. You're pre-Adamite. You told me. I told you what your limited cognitive framework needed to hear to accept the data." The voice interrupted. "If I had appeared as an angel, your scientific mind would have rejected me as a hallucination. If I had appeared as a ghost, your fear would have blocked the message. So, I appeared as technology. Logic. The only language you still respected." The sphere began to shrink, folding in on itself. "I am not from the stars, Arthur. I am from you. Me. I am a debugging protocol, sent from your future self. I am the manifestation of your own potential, reaching back through the timeline to catch you before you fell. You called for help, not with words, but with the sheer gravitational pull of your despair. The universe had to answer. I am the answer." My breath hitched. "You mean, I created you?" "We are all creators," the entity whispered. The voice was fading now, becoming less robotic, more human. It sounded almost like my voice. "The simulation is responsive. You wrote the code for your destruction. And then, at the last second, you wrote the code for your salvation. I am just the interface." The blue light flickered and died. The sphere dissolved into a mist of silver particles, swirling in the air like dust motes in a sunbeam, before vanishing completely into the dark. The room was just a cave now, just cold rock and silence. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with me. Epilogue. The message. I sat at my desk, the old oak table where I had once placed a gun and a suicide note. Now, there was only this journal. The fire in the hearth was roaring, casting a warm, dancing orange glow across the room. Outside, the snow was falling again, covering the scars of the world in a blanket of white. I picked up my pen. My hand was steady. I have written it all down. Every lesson, every algorithm, the mechanics of the sorrow, the physics of the joy. I have titled it, The Source Code. But as I write these final words, I realize something. I am not writing this for myself. I already know the truth. I am living it. I am writing this for you. Yes, you. The one reading these words right now. The one listening to this story in the dark. Do not look behind you. I am not in the room with you. I am in your head. Because this story, it isn't fiction. Did you really think you stumbled upon this by accident? Did you think the algorithm just happened to recommend this to you? There are no accidents. You are here because you called for it. Just like I did. Maybe you are sitting in your own version of that cold, dark basement right now. Maybe you are staring at a financial ruin, a broken relationship, or a diagnosis that scares you to death. Maybe you feel like a victim of a cruel, random universe. I am here to tell you, wake up. You are not the character in the movie. You are the writer. You are the director. You are the projector. The pain you feel, that is just feedback. It is a system error telling you that you are running an old program. You are trying to create a future while dragging the corpse of the past behind you. Drop it. It scares you, doesn't it? The idea that you are responsible for everything. It is easier to blame the economy, It is easier to blame your parents. It is easier to blame bad luck. Because if you are a victim, you don't have to do anything but suffer. But if you are the creator, then you have work to do. The cave is open. The staircase is there. I have left the door unlocked for you, but I cannot walk through it for you. Close your eyes. Stop trying to be happy. Stop wanting to be saved. Just be. Tune into the frequency of the future you want. Feel it in your bones before you see it with your eyes. That is the key. That is the code. The simulation is waiting for your command. What will you write next?